Dhirendra. It's once again nice to have you on our channel. We're having as a kind of a brief introduction to Teestaji. We started this channel basically aimed at introducing the books, only books, particularly of the contemporary Indian relevance as well as global interest. And we started this in the month of August. And so far, we're proud to say about have more than 100 videos on our channel. We are the basic structure of this discussion would be we're having it on. Yeah, it's going to be Zoom will be a basic platform for coordinating the event. The event will be simultaneously live on Manchi Pustakam YouTube channel so that the other people who may not be interested to download app, Zoom app and other things will be able to access the discussions directly. This is how we are doing, and particularly about this particular theme. We know the country is celebrating Amrut Kal, and we don't want to undermine the Amrut Kal, but at the same time, we thought of reminding the country how we lost a sane soul like Gandhi by bringing out important publications centering around Gandhi's assassination. For this whole year, we are planning to introduce 12 books, one in a month, till January 2023. In that series, in that series, this is the second one we are scheduling. And as I'm happy to inform all the participants that we are grateful to both the presenter and as well as the discussant. Both of them are reputed public intellectuals, and they are known for their contribution to the upkeeping of the constitutional values over a period of some decades. So we should thank them, and also we should be able to find or grab any opportunity to associate with them. That's my idea of introducing these two guests today before you to discuss a very important book. That's Gandhi's Assassin. We know about the basic facts through that were informed to us for generations through curriculum, basically. As just a while before the formal beginning of the session, the presenters are suggesting that we should not go by the government narration. We should go by the surroundings that led to the situation of losing Gandhi. And I must congratulate Dhirendra for the subset of the title, Making of Nathuram Godse and his idea of India. That's what we are confronting now. And nobody, I believe, most of the secular intellectuals, the labeled secular intellectuals, are failed to, in my opinion, failed to comprehend the idea of India that motivated Godse to kill Gandhi. Unless comprehending that basic fact and understanding, and we may not be able to sustain the idea of India which we are working for as it is ingrained and given through the Constitution. So this is the idea to behind selecting this book. With these few words, I thank all the participants here and there on the YouTube as well, and also the special guest, Dhirendra. Now the floor, the structure of the program will be Dhirendra will be presenting for about 10 minutes in a brief overview, then followed by your interaction, this kind of dialogue. if this can last up to 45 minutes, this duel, and remaining 10 to 15 minutes will be able to address. We will try to take some questions at least. Yeah, Dhirendra.
Thank you, Viraya. Thank you for inviting me. This I was not originally. I was not planning to write this book. I was just working on a profile of Nathuram Godse for Caravan magazine. With that in my mind, I started my research. I must tell you that for last couple of years, I have been concentrating on archival journalism, particularly focusing on RSS, the history of RSS. So I was anyway in the midst of my archival research of RSS. When I set out to do this profile, uh, there was one question that was there in my mind. I was not being able to, uh, find an answer to that question. And the question was this: all that we know about Godse is based on Godse's statement that he made in the court. Now, if you compare the claims that he made in that statement uh, with the judgment that court delivered, you'll find that a court simply rejected all the claims that Godse made, and still we have been using that statement as a reliable source of history. Now, that was the question. That was the real question as to why have we not tried to find out, you know, the truth of all the claims that he made in the court. So, in that process of my research for the profile, I stumbled upon another statement of Godse. Now that changed everything because it was in Marathi, and when I got translated it, uh, uh, I found several clues. First of all, that second statement of Godse, which he had given to the interrogators, was completely in tune with the court judgment. Number one. Number two, that statement gave me several clues. And when I kind of further investigated those clues, uh, I unearthed several other documents, especially those which were seized from Nagpur headquarters of RSS after the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. Those papers also corroborated the new statement of Godse, the statement that he gave to the interrogators, and those papers were against the claims that Godse made in the court. Now, after that, it became very important for me to present the things in detail. Of course, I wrote a piece for Caravan magazine, and but then that was not enough because in any news platform you have limited space. I mean, in 10,000, 12,000 words, you cannot tell the entire story of entire life history of this man, the man who killed Gandhi. So then I decided to write the book. Uh, Second thing that I want to say here is, before I conclude, uh, is, you know, uh, we see that, of course, when Godse assassinated Gandhi, the first response of RSS was, total rejection of any association of this man with the organization. Then Godse made that statement in the court in which he said that, I joined RSS, but after some time I left RSS, I joined Hindu Mahasabha. So now they started saying that, okay, he had joined RSS, but he had left RSS long before he killed Gandhi. No, this was a myth. And this myth was being propagated initially by pro-RSS writers, but later, even non-RSS researchers and writers and historians started taking that myth, on its face value. And they also started using this expression that that he had left, that he was a former RSS member, right? Whereas the documents tell us that he was a member of RSS till the time he was executed. So that was another myth. Similarly, to establish this myth, another myth was created again by pro-RSS writer, that the relationship between Hindu Mahasabha and RSS was not good. And again, this myth became part of our history text, not just by pro-RSS writers, but even by those who are anti-RSS, who are objective researchers. Even those people have written in similar manner. Now the problem is that it is not that I'm the first one to say this. I mean, Marjia Kasulari, while writing on Hindutva's foreign relations, saw that this was a myth, and that the relationship between the two was very good. Sometimes they had overlapping membership. So despite the fact that some of the objective researchers were pointing out about this fact, we had become used to writing as if the relationship between Hindu Mahasabha and RSS was not good. So this book, which started off in the form of a news piece, became kind of myth buster also.
Thanks, Dhirendra, very much. That is really a very, very good way of starting off today's discussion. I first of all, congratulations on the book, and congratulations on a very, very important chapter, I think, in understanding and trying to unravel this entire narrative that is built up. I will not get into other aspects of the narrative that also need to be deconstructed, because I first want to concentrate on your book. But I just wanted to mention that the pre-trial statement, March 1948, that you managed to, you center a lot of your work on, and plus as you yourself said, that the intelligence report seized from the RSS headquarters by British intelligence at that time, before India became independent, soon became also very crucial to understanding the close connection. I mean, the fact that Nathuram never left RSS in the first place. There was no question of leaving. There was no question of joining, etc. I just wanted to ask, how important was it for you to present this entire narrative in a personal way, like you have done? Because you have actually made personal the political, because you've tried to make us understand Godse as a person he was, his dislike of effeminacy, which possibly also is roots his hatred, visceral hatred for Gandhi, because Gandhi represents the opposite of militaristic Hinduism. In fact, he represents a very different face of Hinduism compared to the kind that Nathuram seemed to have an aversion to. And also the other myth, which I think is so crucial, because all of us who kind of are steeped in Marathi writing and literature in Maharashtra know that one of the greatest narrative myths that have been perpetuated about the killing of Gandhi have ignored the fact that there were 5 attempts on him prior to the one that successfully killed him.
Sorry, I missed a part of it, the last part of it, because there were some noise here.
Yeah. No, I'm saying apart from the fact, first the question is about effeminacy and his kind of aversion to Gandhi's persona, who was so dedicated in life and in politics to demilitarizing any aspect of his own faith, a faith that he very preciously believed. The Sanatan Hindu faith that Gandhi believed had to be had to be demilitarized, had to be made in a very inclusive, whereas everything that Godse stood for was extremely militaristic, and therefore his dislike of ethnic. That's one part. And the second part of my the point I wanted to make is the fact that, you know, the narrative that you're talking about that ignores that centers Godse's relationship with RSS or non-relationship on his statement in court rather than his pre-trial statement, also ignores the fact that there were 5 attempts on Gandhi's life before the one that successfully killed him. And the first one was in 1934. So 2 things I just wanted to bring in to the conversation.
Yes. So, so far as the first question is concerned, this book is basically life history of Godse. It is not about Gandhi assassination. Right. Now, the life history of Godse, you need to, as a writer, it was important for me to explain every aspect of his personality and his psychology, the way it was growing. And, because that also tells us the motivation that led to kill Gandhi, that led him to kill Gandhi. So, and that to reach up to that motivation, you will have to understand the entire process he passes through. He was in the beginning, he was close to Gandhian movement,
Yeah.
right? Just for a few months. And then that very moment, he was taken away to a different direction by Savarkar. And, most of the time, this character doesn't understand exactly what he's doing, or he doesn't have control over the things that are fueling him. And, because often we see that this man is grappling with excitement every time there is expansion in his political life. We also see that this man is constantly in need of, someone to guide him, someone to lead him. In the beginning, it was Savarkar, then Kasinath Pant Limay, then Apte. All these people are actually also leading him to a certain direction. So to understand the actual motivation, the kind of hatred that, gradually built up inside this man, it is important to understand the entire aspect of the milieu in which he was moving ahead. So the book is also in that way a kind of an account of, initial, the evolution of Hindu communalist movement in India. So that is why the entire, all the aspects of Godse I have taken into consideration while writing this book. As for your second question, you see, my focus was on Godse. And I must tell you that many of the things that we understand now at this juncture, are not really based on truth. Some of the things have been hyped up. Some of the things have gone behind myths. For example, I give you one of the attempts to kill Gandhi made by this man, as is being told. In 1944, for example, we are told that is one of the occasions when attempt was made to kill Gandhi, right? Now, if you look at the newspaper reporting of the Times of India carried a report of that event, and Apte was there. Apte was leading that group, but they were basically protesting, right? And I don't find anything in that report which can suggest me that it was an attempt on his life, right? So this kind of confusion is there in several aspects of the history of Hindutva movement in India, right? So it is important to understand the entire process based on the. I tell you one thing, if Gandhi's assassination is a watershed moment, right? If you base your understanding on literature produced after Gandhi's assassination or reports of which were generated after Gandhi assassination about the Hindutva movement before Gandhi assassination, you will get one kind of picture. But if you base your understanding on understanding of Hindutva movement on archival and published material of pre-assassination period, you will get a completely different kind of picture. Now, this theory that many, I'm not saying that those were not attempts. There must have been some attempts also. I mean, I've not gone into the details of any such event in which Godse was not involved, right? But attempts might have been made, and of course, several attempts were made, and but in many cases, the picture that post Gandhi assassination gives is given, the post Gandhi assassination material is giving to us is not exactly correct. I think we have to explore all those events and activities on the basis of archival material and literature produced before assassination.
Some of this is available, and some of this, of course, remains in the opacity of the archives. So that's the problem. And I think we don't have a tradition in our country of making public after 25 years all crucial papers like you have in other developed democracies, which is what it should be. That after 25 years, all such documents should be made out in the public domain for everybody to look at, particularly such crucial events. I just want to come to something else, which is slightly got to do with the biography of Godse again, the character of Godse rather, understanding Godse, and his, of course, relation to Savarkar. I mean, I think that is another very important aspect of your book, that you bring in Godse and Savarkar and you show their extremely close connection. You show how Savarkar influenced Godse very, very closely. And I couldn't help but thinking, given the fact that the RSS, as you yourself mentioned in your starting statement, that it's important to understand the extreme Hindu right wing and its roots in Western India, particularly Maharashtra, the Chitpavan Brahmin caste to which they both belonged, and the kind of adversity of that Chitpavan Brahmin caste. On the one hand, you mentioned that, at that time, when you see this mobilization growing and you feel this insecurity caused by the fact that there's some presence of Kundi Marathas in political life. There is the question of the attacks on the Hindus in sections of India in the pre-partition violence. There's a Mopla rebellion. You mentioned this in your book fleetingly. How much have all these events got to do with the fact that this particular sect of people is also responsible for the growth of the most violent majoritarian movement that this country has seen?
So yes, in the beginning, Maharashtrian Brahmins were supporting this movement. They were the members of RSS. They were the members of Hindu Mahasabha, and and this has been mentioned again. I was 2 years back. I was in Calcutta trying to. I wanted to see some of the files of those who were arrested after Gandhi assassination in Calcutta. So I had visited their intelligence archive at Shakespeare Sarni. There, I was going through all the affidavits that these people who were arrested, those RSS guys who were arrested after Gandhi assassination in Calcutta, were giving. Invariably, all of them belonged to Brahmin caste. Right. That is why we see that even S.H. Deshpande, for example, who was in RSS from 1938 to 1946, based at Pune, he writes in his small memoir, Sanghatale Divas, he writes how it was basically a Brahmin club.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that is why you see that after Gandhi is assassinated, there has been an attack, widespread attack, not just on RSS and Hindu Mahasabha members, but also
On Brahmins.
Brahmins in the state. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The main reason why a section of Brahmins, I'm not saying all the Brahmins, because from Maharashtrian Brahmin community came several progressive leaders also. So, but then a section of Brahmins were clearly thinking of re-establishing what those good old days of Peshwaras through this movement. So that might have been the motive behind Brahmins to support this movement.
Okay. There's an underlying trust also, I think, in the fact that you've dealt with the assassin of Mahatma Gandhi as a person, as a human being who then kind of commits this act of killing. When you look at his childhood, his growing up years, influences on his life. Plus, then you talk about relationships that Apte had and relationships that other of the assassins who had relationships with close relationships with many women protagonists have. So you've brought in this whole aspect of gender and sexuality, relationships, personal relationships very much into the narrative. How important do you think these are in not shaping Godse?
Well, these are very important, really important, because generally in the Hindutva movement, you will see that, there, for example, Savarkar's view, whatever he has written on women, Savarkar believes that children and kitchen are the, areas for women. Savarkar believes that, women should be given a different kind of education, different from men, right? The education that suits to their mentality, to produce sons, brave sons, who can defend Hindudom. So, and he also says that if women deviates from this duty, that should be considered a breach of trust, right? So, and that is still being practiced.
Yeah,
that is still being practiced in RSS. Now Hindu Mahasabha is gone practically.
Small intervention, Dhirendra. Is it? It may not be breach of trust. It's a breach of dictum dictated by the religion.
Sorry,
It may not be a breach of trust. It's
you can call it breach of duty.
Yeah. It's a breach of dictation.
Yeah, breach of dictate, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see, this is one aspect that was influencing him. The another aspect was his own. He was feeling quite awkward around women all the time. And Ashish ji has done wonderful work on he has psychoanalyzed Godse, right? So that also, I mean, I've referred to him. His work is really wonderful. So, all these things. On the other hand, Apte, Apte is like completely, unlike any Hindutva worker.
That's why I said Godse, Apte, Savarkar. That's why I brought up these three, because they're in your book.
Apte is like, whiskey loving, he used to smoke, he was English educated. But he had that unbridled ambition. He thought that perhaps this would be the way to achieve something which he cannot achieve otherwise, right? So that was his motivating factor. And he also understood that this man, Godse, was simpleton, and together so that's why, he used to shift the entire burden of working for Agrani, for example, on to Godse, whereas he would use his time for other things like flirting with, for example, Manorama Salvi. Now, these two characters, Manorama Salvi and Sevanti, these two
I was very interesting the way you brought them in, because particularly Manorama's story and even Sevanti's story, Manorama being a Christian by birth, and all of that angle to it makes it quite a fascinating study that you brought in.
These two characters, to me, it was not very easy to write about them. It was really, I mean, of course, we know that Gandhi was the victim of these people, but then there were other victims also. Manorama, for example, Sevanti, they used to love them. Manorama loved Godse. Sevanti used to love this man, Pahwa, but so their life was also completely destroyed, completely devastated.
I just want to come back again a bit to Savarkar, because I feel that, just as much as we need to understand Godse, this country at this juncture is valorizing Savarkar to a huge extent. And there is a kind of, again, a desire to obfuscate what Savarkar stood for in terms of not just kind of compromise with the British, but, they're trying to valorize a part of his life when he was maybe, when he took on colonial powers to some extent or whatever, but they're also trying to, fact that he was in Andaman jail, the fact that, the transition of Savarkar between 1908 and 1929. And I think that's so important to understand the forces of majoritarianism. And I think younger people need to understand who and what this Savarkar was and how many people he inspired in this malevolent way, including Godse. And Hindu Mahasabha might be nothing today, but the seed of that entire thinking, which was born, I think, like you yourself see in your book, before the partition resolution and before the Muslim League had openly voiced its vision of a kind of religion-based nationhood, was already being voiced by Savarkar.
Yes. So Savarkar, we see two kind of Savarkar. One, when he is in London, he is definitely anti-British, and the book that he wrote there, the first book on 1857, in that book, he talks about Hindu-Muslim unity, right?
Yeah.
But then, after he comes out of jail, he's a completely different man altogether. And that is why I find it problematic, whenever people use the term Hindu nationalist for these people. Why I say this? Nationalism has a context in India. And that context is fight for independence, anti-British struggle.
Yeah.
Now, so long as Savarkar was anti-British, living in London, he was a nationalist. But after he comes out of jail, he becomes pro-British. He is taking out Hindus from national movement and forcing them onto a different direction towards a section of Indians, Muslims. So he was, after he comes out of jail, he was no longer nationalist. He was, in fact, working against national movement. He was weakening national movement and strengthening the British government by helping British government to implement its divide and rule policy. Now, in this process comes his monograph, Hindutva, who is a Hindu in 1923. First clear exposition of religion-based nationalism, which came more than a decade, almost 2 decades before Muslim League Pakistan resolution in 1940. Right. After that, in 1937, when the restrictions are lifted, right, and he's given the public.
We are talking about the restrictions to politically move and engage after he comes out of jail. Yeah.
So after he comes out of, those restrictions were there when he was in Ratnagiri. Those
Correct.
restrictions were
Are
removed.
removed. Yeah.
Yeah.
1932, he comes out, and then the restrictions are removed in 37.
Yeah. So, when restrictions are removed, and he's met president of Hindu Mahasabha in December 1937 at Ahmedabad session of Mahasabha. He gives a speech in which he, for the first time, talks about two-nation theory, clearly two-nation theory. That was in 1937.
Yeah.
Next year, we see archival record full of a slogan, and that is Hindustan Hinduon ka. Immediately after that, we see a new that slogan, a new format. Hindustan Hinduon ka, nahi kisi ke baap ka. Right. Now, all these things were happening 3 years before Muslim League passed its. I'm not saying that it was just the fear psychosis that the Hindutva forces were creating, which led Jinnah to go for that resolution. I'm not saying that. There were other factors also which were propelling him to do that. But this factor has to be understood properly.
Yeah.
He was not just working against nationalists. Like Godse was an example. Godse was actually naturally moving towards a Gandhian movement, anti-British movement, and he was taken away from that movement by Savarkar, and he was put onto a different track altogether.
Yeah.
Right. So these forces were not just pro-British; they were also responsible for the division of India.
Now that's very, very crucial. That's very crucial in terms of a nugget of history and chronological history, which I think not just RSS and Hindu Mahasabha, Indians have not been allowed to understand and have mental blockage towards, because many of us have tried in multiple ways to kind of explain this. And I think that is where this archival kind of material, which is in one sense irrefutable, because if you're rational, then at least you can't negate what is there in the archive. You can't change chronology around. You can't change the timeline, as we put it as journalists. So coming to that, Dhirendra, is a very important concern, because my coverage of communal violence and communal conflict goes back to almost the early 1980s. And I feel that the majoritarian Hindu groups, whether it's the RSS, Hindu Mahasabha, all their various affiliates, Vishwa Hindu Parishad, BJP, they're extremely good at constantly obfuscating cause and effect. And this is a seminal example of it. According to me, it's a seminal example of it, that who is responsible for what. Like you yourself said, I don't believe that only one thing is responsible for the partition. But if we are going to be able to look at chronology, then we have to say that 3.5 years before the Pakistan resolution was passed by the Muslim League, you already had very visceral declarations coming out of the Hindu Mahasabha stage. And I think that is something which Indians don't want to absorb, don't want to admit to themselves for whatever reason. So why this, and even after communal violence, you see this, who cast the first stone? I sort of tried to develop an argument about who cast the first stone, and I have argued that it's not the physical stone that's important. It's the hate speech, it's the targeted hate letting that takes place for 6 months, 1 year prior to that stone being cast, that is actually responsible. What are your comments, Dhirendra?
Yes, you're right, Tista. In fact, you understand it much better than me, because you have done so much work on what happened in Gujarat. But obviously, from the point, I mean, as an archival journalist, I find in records, that often, and that is why I said in the beginning itself, that when something happens, a series of myths are created, by right-wingers, by Hindutva forces, right? Some of those myths get debunked in the process, but some of them find entry into mainstream.
Yeah.
And then we, kind of create a wall for ordinary people. As you said, that astrology is not properly known by ordinary people, not
Yeah.
just supporters of Hindutva, but everybody. The reason I think is that, they have succeeded in penetrating some of the myths into the mainstream. And those myths are creating obstacles for the flow of information.
Very important, very well put. Myths are actually creating obstructions in the actual flow of rational information. And that will give me to one of my pet subjects, which is journalism. Because I think you certainly represent one of those rare examples today. And fortunately, there are many of us, but I still feel they are a sort of very, very minor breed of journalists who are still dedicated to fact, to rationality, to investigation, to archiving. And we see the media going in a completely opposite direction. So I would really like your comments as a senior journalist who's kind of now dedicating his time to this kind of work. Two questions that follow. One is that, what does the media need to do to get back to its real work? And secondly, how important it is that public archives are made really public in this country, which is that after 20-25 years, they should not hinder you with 80 rupees a page kind of restrictions, and they should be out there in the open by the government of India and the state so that we can investigate them.
Well, so far as the first question is concerned, of course, we all know what is happening in this country. Journalists just have to do journalism. Journalists, sometimes I see journalists doing activism. I find problem in that, right? Journalists have to remain honest to the information that they gather and their exact presentation, right? That is the sole objective of journalism. Having said that, I would like to come back to the second part of your question. This archival journalism, in other countries, in many other countries, archival journalism is not something unique, right? But in India, I think, and this has become very important, especially after, RSS has become so powerful in the country. But that it is important to understand because, right wing, communal forces everywhere, majority communalism everywhere has this tendency to create series of myths, right? To cover their tracks. Now, those tracks becomes very important now when they come to power. Those tracks can be unraveled only if archives are, people are given access to archives. Archives are the only place where you can find the real picture of those tracks which have been covered by rightist forces. And it is very important because you see, and why these people are trying to prevent you from reaching there? Simply because they know that history is not with them.
Yeah.
That is why it is all the more important to bring out history and put them in front of them.
The book of course, is out there now, and it hopefully will do very well. You said it's already doing quite well, and it's a huge effort that you put in. Are you going to thinking of bringing it out in other languages? Because that's my pet concern again, is that there's so much material in English, but often we don't have enough in the languages. And I think it's so important that work like this does get into the languages because it opens up a lot of possibilities of discussion, understanding, debate, even adverse comment. But I think that's the beginning point of a discussion, right?
Yeah. So yes, in fact, I'm working on that. I've already given rights for Tamil and Kannada editions. I'm still in discussion with the publishers of many other languages, right? So very soon, in fact, I'm trying to ensure that the book comes out in as many languages as possible.
Last question, if you'll allow me, Comrade Kanduri, my last question, because I know that we are running out of time. Do I have some more time?
Yeah, we have. You can proceed.
Yeah. Is a couple of questions and a couple of observations rather. That one of the concerns one has had is about how aspects like a person like Nathuram Godse or an organization like Hindu Mahasabha or the RSS or the assassination of Gandhi. I know you're writing on Godse here, but I'm putting a question about all of this which are linked, how they are portrayed to young minds. This is a matter of concern to me because I also am working in education and with educational syllabi in terms of social sciences and social science textbooks and NCRT and all of this. And I remember we all grew up with a certain kind of textbook which was anodized and completely not really delving into the controversial areas. But still, when it came to assassination of Gandhi, there'd be one paragraph, maybe just the mention of the assassin's name. And when it came to partition, which was before or after that, you would have 3 paragraphs, which is the birth of the Muslim League, direct action day, partition, So given the fact that you are a sensitive writer and journalist, and I'm sure you're aware of what it means for pedagogy and young people to understand. I'm a believer, for instance, in the fact that young people can really handle contradictions and a lot of nuances, and we are insulting them by not allowing them to make up their own minds about such difficult issues. We try to keep them away. In fact, that makes it worse. What is your take on that?
Yes, this is really wonderful job that you're doing. Actually, the problem is that, and that is why the problem we are facing this problem now, because we were not taught, while we were in this school, we were not taught all these things in detail. We were not given a kind of picture which was bereft of those myths, right? So giving those pictures, those real pictures, in a simple manner, is very important. For example, the government is observing, rather, I would say, the Partition Remembrance Day.
Yeah.
Right. It is important to tell young people and everybody, in fact, as to what was the role of RSS in creating a condition in which partition became inevitable. Number one. Number two, what was the role of RSS in worsening the kind of crisis that resulted from partition? All these materials are available in archives. They have to be presented in a simple manner. So I mean, using this occasion, for example, the government's announcement of Partition Remembrance Day, we can give, the true picture. Of course, I don't expect the RSS to give true picture of partition, right? But then, objective researchers should come out and present everything in a simple and coherent manner, right? And with proof, right? Complete citation of archival records only, right? So that will really help students, the young mind, yeah.
I mean, I really thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, and I'm sorry, my dates were a bit difficult, so it took a bit of time to arrange it, but I was really thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. I'd like to tell your viewers on this very prestigious channel that we are discussing Gandhi's Assassin by Mr. Dhirendra Jha, senior journalist, The Making of Nathuram Godse and His Idea of India, a Penguin publication. It's doing very well, and I think all of us owe it to an honest understanding of history to pick up a copy and actually pass it around, because I think we need to organize discussions around it, debates around it, and also demythify the kind of narrative that has built up, which has been so very one-sided. I think no effort is enough, but this is certainly a huge step in the right direction. Congratulations, Dhirendra, and from a fellow writer, congratulations.
Thank you, Tista. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah.
Dhirendra, may I request before winding up the session to focus on the relationship between Sangh and Sabha, which you mentioned briefly, because there is a lot of this uncovered chapter in the Indian history, and particularly modern Indian political history. So I thought it should be brought to the notice of the serious audience and readers in a little detailed manner.
Yeah, so, well, this is a good question, Virya. So, you see, as I told you, if you want to understand the relationship between Sangh and Sabha, you will have to base your understanding on pre-assassination literature. That is one precondition, which is very important. Now, if you base your understanding on pre-assassination archival record and published literature, you will find that this relationship was kind of overlapping relationship. We find several instances of dual membership. For example, Godse, of course, is an example, but then there are several other examples also. For example, Aman Ghatate. Aman Ghatate was Sangh Chalak of Nagpur, and he was very close to Hedgewar as well as Golwalkar. It was at his place in Nagpur that Hedgewar died, and he was like one of the right-hand man of Golwalkar, and he was also Sangh Chalak of Nagpur, as I told you. But then he was also treasurer of Mahasabha, for the entire 1940s, and also during late 30s, right? So such examples are, there are so many such examples. Just after independence, the government of Bombay province had prepared a list of Hindu Mahasabha and RSS men, and they found that in many of the cases, the same person is member of both the organizations. So, and this is recorded history. I mean, it is not something which I have only I have seen. Even Kapoor Commission talks about this. So this relationship was like very good. And Marja Kasulari, for example, as I mentioned, Marja Kasulari had given detail of that relationship, which was not inimical, as was presented by, and that was one of the myth, by D.V. Kelkar.
Yeah.
Only 2.5 months after Godse was hanged, this article came out in Economic Weekly, which is the old name of EPW. That was in 1950, I suppose, in February 1950, right? So that article, without giving any citation, talks of a lot of things as to how the relationship between RSS and Hindu Mahasabha was not good. And then he also gives a particular quote that Savarkar, when he got very upset with RSS, he said that, this epitaph of RSS member would say that he was born, he joined RSS, but he died without doing anything, right? Now, this quote has been used again and again by various kind of people, not just the pro-RSS writers, but also by objective researchers, right? So this myth making that happened then only, just after Godse was hanged. The objective was to establish that what Godse said in the quote was correct, that when he joined Hindu Mahasabha, he couldn't have remained a member of RSS because the relationship between the two was not good, right? So this myth, that was the objective of this myth, but unfortunately, we have got carried away. Objective researchers have got carried away by that myth, and instead of looking beyond it, instead of questioning the claims, and it was all the more important to question the claims of D.V. Kelkar, because in the same article, D.V. Kelkar is saying that he was a very good friend of Hedgewar. He was an RSS man, right? So, and still everybody took whatever he said, and without giving any citation, on their face value, right? And that is why we have come to a point where it has become common sense to believe that the relationship between these two organizations was not good.
I have one more thing, if you allow me. I just thought of it when you were discussing this question. Is that the shifting stand, or the complete turnaround of Golwalkar and Savarkar once the assassination took place vis-a-vis Godse, would have caused him a huge disappointment. In fact, you hinted at that in your book as well, that the way they've turned around and kind of said that, it's a dastardly act, not about the connection, about the way they started using very reverential language about Gandhi, saying that he's a revered gentleman and a very revered personality. And so that kind of spotlights the inherent cowardice, in our opinion, in my opinion at least. And I think that has also not been dealt with to the extent that it ought to be in terms of public discourse and the myth making about this militarized nationalism, which actually is so willing to step back and completely do a turnaround just to escape any long arm of the law. Dhirendra?
Sorry, there was some problem in can you repeat your question? I couldn't.
Okay. Did you get the beginning part when I was mentioning that basically the portion in which you have dealt with the fact that, once the assassination takes place, you suddenly find Golwalkar and Savarkar using a very different language about Gandhi. In fact, talking very reverentially about him and talking about him being a revered figure in their public statements just to escape the long arm of the law. And this in my view, at least, as a student of political science, denotes cowardice, not even sticking to their principles because they wanted to escape the clutches of the state. And you bring this up in your book about how Godse would have seen this, in a sense, a betrayal by his mentor and by the organization that he belonged to, RSS. But he still goes ahead with the kind of statement he makes in court. So how do you explain that?
Yeah, so in the book, I have explained this phenomena because his loyalty was complete, as I told you, that he was like completely, he was so much impressed, he was so much influenced by these people that in his court statement, first of all, his court statement was not completely of his making. You see, Namdar, who was part of the team of lawyers defending accused persons, writes in his book as to how one of the closest aides of Savarkar was assisting Godse in making that statement. Now, in the statement, his whole effort is to establish that there was no conspiracy.
Yeah.
So one by one, he is exonerating all the co-accused as well as the organizations he was associated with. So he says, I joined RSS, then I left it. Then he says, then he joined Hindu Mahasabha, then he left it. Then he joined Hindu Rajdal, right? So he is like exonerating both the organizations, not just RSS, also Hindu Mahasabha, right? So obviously he was passing through that emotional time, evident, in the contemporary records. But yes, he did feel left out.
Thank you so much.
That feeling was the same as Madanlal Dhingra might have felt about Savarkar.
Thank you, friends. And especially I express my gratitude to both the discussant and the presenter, the author. Both of them are renowned authors. Before winding up this session for the day, let me make few announcements. We are happy to inform the audience that Tushar Gandhi accepted my request to discuss his book, Let Us Kill Gandhi, in the month of May. And I think without consulting Teesta, I am making the proposal that Teesta's book, Dossier on Gandhi's assassination, will be discussed presented by her in the month of April. And along with these two announcements, I'm having one more announcement to make. Professor Chaman Lal, who is heading the Delhi government's Bhagat Singh archives and noted historian on Bhagat Singh and his work writings, so agreed to present his book Bhagat Singh Reader on this month on the March 25th, because it's supposed to be organized on 23rd, because being Chaman Lal and being the book on Bhagat Singh, he would be too occupied on that day. So we are shifting 2 days earlier. So these are the three announcements for the audience, and as Dhirendra as rightly pointed out, there's a lot of depth of information like this in regional languages, and being known to me, and I can make a personal request, Dhirendra, to give the Telugu translation rights, so that I can proceed to commence the work.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll write formally to you on this. And with these few announcements, I thank all once again. And I don't think there are much questions. There are a good number of people joined on the YouTube as well. So I thank to them all as well. Thank you once again. I will see you, Tista, once again with your book in the month of April at a date given to you. No, you're on mute.
Fix a date, sir. We'll fix a date for sure.
Yeah,
Let me just check. Yeah.
please.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all.